Broken Rage, released directly on Amazon Prime, is an interesting little genre exercise that only clocks in at just over 60 minutes, where we essentially get the same story of an elderly hitman who's forced to go undercover, told in two different styles. Once as a serious thriller, and the other as a goofy comedy. Takeshi Kitano, who stars as the hitman and also wrote and directed this, has had an extensive career in Japan both as a comedian and for directing his own set of serious gangster dramas, and from my understanding, this is essentially him parodying himself. Now, I'm not quite familiar with his work as a filmmaker. I'm only familiar with him as an actor because he was in Battle Royale, which was excellent, but I imagine if you are more familiar with his work, you'll appreciate this even more. Even without having that connection, I thought this was fairly enjoyable. What I noticed was how, even during the serious part of the film, it still has this air of parody to it. For example, with the way schemes just fall so neatly in place with such little effort that that's the joke in and of itself. But while this part's enjoyable enough, considering there's really not much emotional depth to these characters, I think this works at its best when it gets to the full-on comedic portion. It starts off with very predictable gags where the hitman who was previously portrayed as flawless is now just clumsily falling over himself and tripping on things. And at first you can predict a lot of these gags as they're in this nature, but once it gets past the initial setup, it gets considerably more cartoonish and over the top, with some sequences deviating heavily and going on more tangents than what we previously saw, including at some points even breaking the fourth wall. And I thought that's when it worked at its best. And in the end, I'd say this works more as an experiment than anything, but it's a decently entertaining experiment, and one that I can appreciate for trying to do something different while trying to remain fairly accessible. So, solid effort overall.